Possession stories. I had an aunt who was possessed in the childhood. In the early 1980s. Aunt is only 16-year-old. Starts acting aggressive and weird, used to be nice person. Starts talking in a man's voice, constantly asking for water. Could drink like 8 to 9 jars of water and still ask for more. Used to stretch and cut herself. Other weird things happened as well, like her clothes catching fire without any sparks or heat source being nearby. Aunt would bang the walls of her room and scream in a man's voice. Very deep. Everybody in house would often see a black, burnt figure looking inside the house from the windows. Family friend recommended a priest to take my aunt to. Granddad had to call 5 to 6 friends of his to carry my aunt. She had superhuman strength. Was hard to hold her down even with 5 to 6 men, who worked in the railways. Worked with machines all day, so were built as fuck. Eventually take her to the priest after arranging a date beforehand. Exorcism was done on her, and after hours, the spirit was removed and bound to an object, doll. Priest told Grandpa that the evil spirit was sent to my aunt by one of their neighborhood women who was rumored to be a witch. Priest asked my granddad if he wanted revenge for this. Grandpa said, "Do whatever you want," and left it at that. Priest gave my aunt protective necklace and prayers to recite. A few months later, the witch's daughter died of cancer and they eventually sold the house and moved out. The witch tried to trap my grandma's household again. Came by to give a gift, a wine bottle and some sweets, which my grandpa refused and slammed the door on her face. Aunt is alive and healthy even today, about to be retired after working in the banking industry for 25+ years. Is 58. Never had any mental issues or psychotic breaks after this particular event. Still pretty religious.
This is a good one, from my cousin. Story happens in Baguio City, northern mountains of the Philippines. Back when she was 9. The next door neighbor had just moved in and started renovating the house. Their grandpa was nailing the chandelier to the ceiling and dropped the hammer next to a pile of wood when he was done. Then, according to him, something pulled his leg and he fell off the ladder. The very next day, he fell severely ill. All the checkups came up negative of any illness despite his condition. When the family arrived home, they noticed their maid was acting out of character and irate. The next day she started spazzing out and screaming. The day after she would start speaking in a completely different language. My cousin actually went to that house to play one day, and she could hear the screaming from the basement floor where they kept the maid. Cousin says the voice from the maid was 2 people speaking at a time. The maid and an old man. After a few days, the maid's face was so bruised because after one of the possessions lapsed, she'd go unconscious and collapse. Everyone was so afraid of catching her, that she'd fall flat on her face. They found out the other language she was speaking was Kankanai, a rare language spoken in the mountains. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/kankanai_language. Luckily, my cousin's mom spoke Kankanai. She came over to speak with the possessed maid. And the very moment they met, the creature possessing the maid pointed at her and in Kankanai said, "I knew your great-grandfather," and started naming her ancestors one by one. My aunt asked the spirit what it wanted. And the spirit told her his home was shattered because their grandfather dropped a hammer on it. It was already willing to just kill their grandpa and leave. But she bargained, and he said he'd be willing to let everything be if they managed to sacrifice a black pig and a white chicken on the very next morning. Obviously, since no one had any sleep and who the hell sells a black pig in 3 a.m. in the morning, they couldn't find one. They tried bargaining again, and the spirit gave them an extension. After finally finding the pig and chicken, they held the ritual in our cousin's lawn. Candles, and all that. After the ritual, the spirit gave them a condition. They had to give him a lei every day, which is a practice where families leave a portion of their food to the spirits of the mountains. Asides that, they weren't allowed to be excessively noisy. The next day, their grandfather was released from the hospital and was completely healthy. Unfortunately, they didn't hold their end of the bargain. They didn't offer a lei to the spirit, and they kept making so much noise. The month after, their grandfather died and they moved out of the house.
My mom used to come home drunk every night and fall asleep. Occasionally she'd wake up in a zombie-like violent state, go completely off the wall in ways she never did before. I'd run away for the night and in the morning she would have no recollection of it. I've known a lot of alcoholics but never saw anything like this. Either she was on hard drugs that I wasn't aware of or something else was going on. Hard to explain, but it was not normal.
I consider myself a quite mentally strong person, but I have one or two experiences where I am highly likely that I have encountered possessions or demonic forces fucking with me. First one. Be me. Just moved into an apartment in Vienna. Quite cheap for the amount of space I got, plus only being 5 minutes away from uni. All is well for weeks. Always felt cold in the apartment and unwell for reasons I could not pinpoint back then. Start getting into heavy daily weed smoking habits. Fast forward some weeks. Daily routine limited to sleeping long hours, picking up bud and going grocery shopping. Only hanging with people that have extremely negative worldviews, one of them even a Satanist. Wake up from time to time with scratches or the feeling of being choked. One day had enough and decide to take high dose of acid and battle this thing. I can actually somewhat communicate with him, learn that an old man died there alone and had no one find him for weeks. Agree to leave him with the home and move out. Girl that lives there now and moved in after me is heavily depressed and last I know attempted a suicide. Old buildings are scary, man, you do not know the shit that went down in them.